We're going to talk about cash flow today. We talked the ice apocalypse that's going on in Dallas. What is the deal with Dallas weather? It's like a third. I mean, it's crazy now. You're like in Canada or something.
Yeah, it's 81. It was 81 on Monday. Literally, t-shirt, you're sweating. And then today, it's like 30 degrees outside, ice all over the ground. It's super
yuck. Well, I'm not a big fan of that type of weather myself. That's why I live in Arizona. I guess I'm glad that I didn't move to Dallas. I was going to move there a few years ago, and with the weather that you guys are getting, I think I'm better off. But listen, let's chat a little bit about cash flow because it is such a big deal for so many businesses. You actually can you can be in financial trouble, and cash flow is a way that you can maybe avoid the inevitable if you're not careful with it, right? You can do a lot. There's a lot of different things that you can affect around cash flow. So let's talk about it. I guess first and foremost, from your experience in accounting and finance, where are the areas that people do cash flow well, and where do you feel like they get in trouble?
People do cash flow well, rarely.
I used to consult for a big box retailer many years ago. They're the only ones I know that do cash flow really, really well. And they get cash flow because number one, this will be good because we can talk a little bit about this. Actually, I think you saying that not a lot of people do it really well. Let me give you what the gold standard looks like. And then we can talk about all the challenges that we have and how do we align ourselves more closely with the gold standard. So, the joke there is you pay everybody way after you've sold their product. 6 months after you've sold their product, you're finally paying your vendor. That's not something all of us can do. Interestingly enough, one of the things I found with big box retailers, what they do a little bit different than everybody else is they actually have a department that hedges. So they buy futures contracts against commodities in order to maintain price continuity. So let's just say it's something like oil, motor oil. They understand that oil prices are affected by so many different things. If you haven't been to the pump yet today, trust me, the Russia invasion of Ukraine you're gonna see $5 a gallon gas here really, really soon. I think it's still like 600,000 barrels a day that come to North America from Russia. So without that, there's going to be a supply and demand change. So they're really good at getting paid quickly. They're really good at paying their vendors very, very slowly. And then finally, they buy futures contracts to hedge the price of commodities into the future. Now, we can't do all of those. I certainly don't have a hedging department. We don't have a hedging department at Profit Matters that's hedging commodities futures, and trying to figure out orange juice and pork belly prices for the next 2 years and how that affects us. But what are other things that people do that do it really well?
People collect deposits. That's one of the best things. So when we look at construction, collecting a deposit or collecting a fee when you mobilize on a job before you're buying materials, before you're paying for labor. So anything you can do to collect money before you're paying money out is extremely helpful. The other things are exactly what you said. Slow paying vendors when you get paid, collecting faster from your customers. Yep. It's basic common sense, but it gets really complicated, especially when you're working on multiple jobs.
Yeah, and it is something that you can get yourself in a lot of trouble with that too. If you don't invoice people quickly enough, we talked about this in another one of our videos. If you don't, I had an instance with a vendor that I worked with that invoiced me for stuff from 2 years ago. And I just told him, sorry, you're just not getting paid on it. And what can he really do at this point? I mean, it's been 2 years and he forgot to send an invoice. That's not on me. That's really on you. So, making sure that you do things like automating that. I automate my invoice processing so that, I don't even have to think about sending out the invoices. The invoices are going out. I've scheduled them ahead of time so that those things are getting done. So when you're talking about construction, I mean, it's really about getting the money, the down payment, right? And then being able to utilize that cash to buy your materials and those kind of things.
That's right. So you don't go negative. So the point of cash flow isn't always that we're flush with cash, but it is so that we don't run out of money. So there's a couple of ways to not run out of money if your AR and your expenses are negative. So the biggest misconception I would say is my company's really profitable. And if you look at my financial statements, it shows that we're making money. Why don't we have any cash? Well, the number one reason is we're looking at financials on the accrual basis, which is best to manage your business. So what we see there isn't what we've actually collected. So now you have this AR, and you go on to the problem with AR. How do we collect our AR faster? So that's the number one way to fix cash flow, right? So what we talked about, collecting a deposit, collecting an upfront fee, having a retainer or a design fee, depending on what business you're in, are very helpful. If you're a business that buys products, you're in the retail industry, like you said, you're in manufacturing, you're in construction, collecting deposits, collecting design fees, finding other ways to have a service that you can collect and make your margin up front. So you could use your profit from the services to cover the cost of the product coming up in the future also helps, right? So anytime that we can collect money up front. The problem with commercial construction is you usually get paid via pay application. There's no way to collect a deposit or an upfront fee, if you will. So the only thing you can do is mobilize on the job and front end load your pay application, if you will. So you really have got there, you really have dropped materials out off on the job site, you have some labor involved, some admin time that's gone into the project up front to create schedules, things of that nature. You usually can put that in a line item on your pay application, get that first check coming in, and that really helps.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. Thinking about that. Now, if you can't do that, and I know we just talked a little bit about construction, but I've also used things like factoring in the past, where I can actually sell my invoices to somebody who's going to take a couple points on that. And excuse me, not only as a business owner, but also as an investor, I like to buy that kind of paper. Personally, I love that kind of stuff because lots and lots of people were like, hey, look, I've got, I'm selling a product to XYZ Corporation. They're very, very credit worthy, but they tend to pay in 60 days. Would you lend me the money for 60 days? Would you give me maybe 80% of that money up front for 60 days? And I can make 2 points on my money, sometimes 3 or 4 points on my money in that short period of time. So it improves the cash flow for the business because they get the cash right now or some of it. And it's certainly beneficial to me because I can make a couple of points on it. Now you got to have the margins to do that, right? If you're in a super tight margin industry, you might not be able to factor those invoices, but that's something that you can do as well. I think as well as, using your borrowing capabilities. You and I've talked about this before. When you don't need cash, that's the best time to get cash because you may need it in the future and you may need it for this cash flow thing. Your margin might look good on the accrual side, but when you get down to the bank account, that's where the rubber meets the road. You can have great financials and go out of business.
The best use of a line of credit is to cover your AR. So if you can grow your business, but you can't grow your business because you're constantly waiting on cash, grow your business and use a line of credit. We're not using a line of credit because we're not making money, because we need it to cover payroll, because, it's covering our margin, different things like that. We're using a line of credit purely because the collection period of our AR is slower. It's great. If you look at it and you look at the cost of a line of credit and you look how much you can do with it and how much you can grow your business, it's awesome. Like you said, factoring line of credit and taking investors' money on things like that, saying, I'm going to do this really big project. So the number one thing you need to look at before you take on a job is look at your working capital, because if you have enough working capital, you won't have to factor your AR or things of that nature. If you're short on your working capital, you can figure out exactly what you need to cover that project.
So important, because you can either be your own bank or you can use somebody else's bank. But when you don't have either of those options, that's where you really get in trouble, because you end up in this constant situation, which we've all probably done as business owners, of robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? The check comes in for $50,000 from that project, and you've already committed $60,000 of it this week out the door. So you got to play this juggle game of, how do I fit the round peg in the square hole? How do I get all the vendors paid while, still keeping the lights on here? And it can get really tricky. And once you've got down that slippery slope, it's really hard to get out of it unless you get some big windfall that comes your way. And who really wants to risk their whole business on a bet that somehow finances are going to improve in the future? It's better to have a great grasp on it right now and use those type of things as a bridge to get you from point A to point B in your growth.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than getting halfway through a project and going, oh, I'm out of money. I mean, you knew you were going to run out of money at the beginning. So saying, okay, I want this project, or I want this job, or I want to manufacture this thing, knowing it's going to take X amount of dollars, going to secure that money, and then using it is a way better way to go about it.
Now, there are some things that you can do as a business owner, and I have done many of these myself. One of my mentors once told me the best way to get 120-day terms is to pay your vendors in 120 days. Now, that is tricky, right? And small businesses can't afford to do business with somebody that pays really slowly like that. But it is something that you can do. Understanding that, a 30-day payable might be able to be paid in 45 days and the vendor will never say anything. Now, this works both ways. When it's you paying, you want to pay as slow as you possibly can. You want to keep hold of that money. When it's you receiving, you want the exact opposite. But let me tell you, from being an executive in many companies that have an accounting team, let me tell you how things get paid. Things get paid by the squeaky wheel gets oiled first. If there's 50 invoices laying there, all that are due for the next check run, or maybe I've pushed those out to the next check run. If somebody calls me and is like, hey, any chance I can get paid this week? I tend to just get them paid that week. And so do my payables people. So the best way to get paid quickly is to actually ask for payment quickly. And you can set up a routine with your customer, and you can automate that routine with all the tools you use today. If you have 30-day terms, sending out something on the 28th day and saying, hey, just want to make sure you have all the paperwork and that we're planning on getting the check out this week. You can do that, pretty well, because the number one thing that I'm going to do if I want to pay you slowly, let me tell you the secret to how you pay people slowly is it's a 30-day terms. And at day 45, they call me and they say, oh, we didn't get our check. And I say, oh, do we have that invoice? Oh, I think we're missing that invoice. Can you send that invoice over to me? And then you send that invoice over to me. And then I've just bought myself more time. And then I can say, well, we only do check runs every other week. And unfortunately, we missed this check run. So now I've got you at 60, 75 days. And it's your fault, not mine, because I'm saying that I didn't receive the invoice. So that confirmation of receipt, I think, can be a big part on that too.
It can. There's a lot of ways that you can speed up AR also. So you could speed up AR by telling customers you're going to direct debit their accounts.
Yes.
There's lots of software out there now. You can do that. So you send a contract in advance and you have this ability where we can direct debit, right? We do that at Profit Matters. It reduces the amount of AR that you have overall, and it really helps with your collection period.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an option. With vendors, you can delay, you can slow pay, right? Or you can extend terms. Like you said, you could even call vendors and you could say, hey, we're going to pay you payments, right? So we're going to slow pay an invoice. So let's say we're going to pay some in 30 days. We're going to pay 60, 90. There's always those incentives of getting a discount. So a 2% discount if you pay it in 60 days, whatever that is. That used to be really common, and I hear it less and less now. So go and ask your vendors, especially the ones you spend the most amount of money with, can I get a discount if I pay you early?
Yes.
So that helps your cash flow because you're saving more money.
Big time. Yeah, we forget about that. I mean, even credit cards, it's funny taking credit cards as payment. And I've done lots of consulting in the past. And I have found that if I'm doing executive coaching, I always let them do with credit cards. Why? Well, because they forget about it. I just auto debit it. They get the points. And I'm like, look, you want to pay me because you get the points, So it's, you got to play that game a little bit on both ends. You have to be very, very diligent on making sure you're sending your invoices properly on time. You're following up. You're creating the right patterns. Hey, if I absolutely have to be paid as a small business, I might follow up, a week before that invoice and say, hey, Ash, I just want to make sure you got everything you need from me so that I can get paid next week per our terms. That's not being a pain in the ass. That's actually just doing good business. And eventually that client will get into that routine of paying, because the other thing that happens with small businesses, you don't know the situation other people are in too. If people are paying you slowly, let's say this is 90 or 120 days, you have to ask yourself, are they paying me slowly because they want to improve their cash flow? Or are they paying me slowly because maybe they have really serious internal issues and they might not be around in 60 days. I just had this happen with somebody that I was processing a refund for one of my contractors that was supposed to do work here. I gave him a check last August. he promised me the refund this week, but this is the third time he's promised me the refund. So now I'm asking myself, is he slow paying me, or is he in serious trouble and I might never get paid?
Right.
You never see my money back.
Yeah. You know what's interesting also, Derek, is we have a slider at Profit Matters. Speaking of the amount of terms, if you ask your CPA, so whoever's listening to this call, go ask your CFO, CPA, whoever's keeping up with your cash flow for you. Tell them what happens if I collect 5 days faster and I pay 5 days slower. And our slider will actually tell you what that does to your cash flow instantaneously. So if you're listening, we will do that for free. If you have a budget in QuickBooks, we'll connect with you. We'll jump in there and we'll show you the slider and we'll go, what if we collect 15 days faster? What if we pay 10 days slower? Whatever that delta is. And you would be amazed how 3 days, 5 days, 10 days makes a significant difference in a big business. So what did you say this week, Derek? You said something like minutes to millions, and you said,
yeah, no, I've been talking about this. I talked about this with the busy guy. He's like, minutes equate to millions of dollars. So, and the same is true when it comes to cash flow. Paying somebody 5 days faster or slower, getting a discount on those, all of that stuff equates to big time margins. And when you're talking about industry, listen, I think the biggest misconception, and I used to do a lot of work with ASU here locally. I was an entrepreneur in residence. So I'd go and talk to these classes and I would bring a product and I'd bring something in and I would say, okay, what does it cost a company to make this iPhone? And I would listen to their answers and I would write it all on the board. For the most part, most consumers believe that there's like 70, 80, 90% margin in most things. There's not. Like, it's once you figure it all out. I have a friend that's in the medical industry, and he told me 3% margin is the goal. Like 3% of the bottom line is a massive. That's like super, super successful. So think about that. If you can affect by paying vendors early, you can get 1% better terms. That's okay. So let's say that's 1%. If you could do that with the whole business, that'd be a 25% increase in the bottom.
Are you back?
Hey, we're back. Oh, that was so weird. I think it was actually a problem with StreamYard because I could access the rest of the internet, but I couldn't access their website. Oh, well.
Yeah. Your video had a black box with the wheel spinning.
So did yours.
I'm not sure what everyone saw. So we're back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. We'll work to wrap it up. We did have one question, and the question actually that came through the comments was, how about I just pay my rent more slowly? I mean, you could technically do that. I'm not sure what your landlord will think about that. There are certain things like food and rent that you usually don't want to pay slowly because they could dramatically affect your ability to do business. But let's summarize this. So and I'll go back and re-edit this in the end and republish it because we have about a 5-minute section there of us both frantically trying to figure out what was going on. But yeah, I mean, I guess the point is that there's lots of different ways that you can affect cash flow. Obviously, AP and AR are part of that. I think having a great process like the process that an outsourced accounting firm can do, because the only way that we're going to remember is to actually set up process. You might remember, I got to send Joe an invoice every Friday. With us, you tell us that and we make that an automated process. So that happens every single Friday. And then we can get repetitive on that and we can say, okay, well, we know that, that Joe tends to pay slowly. Let's make sure that we're doing the follow-up and reaching back out and automating that part of it. I think going back to terms is another one. Either acting as your own bank or, finding a bank that you can work with is another one. I think focusing on, we just started talking a little bit about focusing on better margins, I think is something to think about too.
Taking a discount, collecting a deposit,
yes.
Those are huge.
Yes, collecting deposits, having some cash up front is really important, I think, particularly if you have to buy supplies and do the work. I think if you're a services company, it's a little bit different. And listen, we're seeing this trend happening all the time now with people that are with companies that are asking for payment up front. You and I have been talking about this with pricing. It's like, hey, look, here's our monthly fee, or if you pay us all up front, we're going to give you this significant discount. That can be really beneficial. I go for that all the time because I'm like, yeah, it's $500 here, it's $200 there. I think the other thing let's talk about for a minute or so before we wrap up is really analyzing your products and your customers and eliminating as many of the low margin ones as possible. One of the real problems that businesses get into, and if you play this rob Peter to pay Paul game, I can almost guarantee that you don't really have an understanding of your margins, because what I have found in consulting over the years is that many times businesses, if they're well banked, they forget about the fact, or they miss that maybe it's possible that they have negative margin on some of their customers, and they're doing work and they're getting, negative 1% on that account because of the way it's being managed or because of the discounts that we've given them. So you want to talk a little bit about that? How do we focus on an improved margin on a customer by customer basis?
Running a profit and loss, I would say, by customers, the biggest thing, keeping up with expenses by project, by customer, by job, things of that nature. Yeah. Using your products and service codes so that you can see, okay, these 4 things really make us money, and the other 2 that we sell a lot of just drain us of time and energy and really don't make us anything. So when you can understand which products are making money, or which services, or which part of a job, then you can work on your estimating, you can work on your generating more revenue or charging more for a specific service. So a lot of times in construction, we see something where, okay, we're really great at doing one part of the job, but we're not great at another. And so some people will go in and they'll say, we'll do any remodel in your home. But what they find is we make a lot of money remodeling kitchens, not the entire house. And so when you figure out this one thing is where we make money, then you can focus on it, and you can throw more marketing dollars at selling that one thing you're good at too. And so it helps your budget overall. And I'll tell you, Derek, when we talk about robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you are in real estate development or any kind of construction and you take a check and you pay for other projects expenses, it is illegal. You will get in so much trouble. That is like white collar jail time for that kind of moving money around. And here's the reason why. If you pay me, Derek, for a job that I did at your house, and I take the money and I pay for another job, and your house gets liened because I didn't pay the concrete bill, or I didn't pay something on your job, right? Whatever it is, didn't pay the pool contractors, and they lien your house so that you can't sell it, and you really have a lien on your property, whether it's commercial, residential, that's big trouble, because you already paid me for it, and now I don't have money to go pay the vendor.
Wow, that's huge. That is huge. And it's something to think about. That compliance piece can really get you into a lot of trouble. I really am a big fan of, particularly in manufacturing, if you do any sort of custom manufacturing, which would include construction, of having a P&L on every job. And that could be a really basic P&L. Maybe you sell a $4,000 product and you sell 10 of those a day. Having some sort of profit and loss statement, even if that's just a piece of paper that's on there, it's like, okay, we know that these are our fixed costs. Here's the amount of labor we put into it. Here's the amount of materials we put into it. Did we or did we not? We have a checkbox at the bottom. Did we hit our goal? Because if you don't do that, what tends to happen is it isn't that you're losing money on all the projects. It's that you're losing money on a percentage of projects. And then that's going to bleed into the P&L of all of those other projects, and show you at the end of, well, we only have a 2% margin. Well, maybe you have a 20% on 90% of your customers and a negative 18% on these other ones. And that's what's affecting the number. So project job costing, and you and I've talked about this even in manufacturing, having people not just check in on the time clock, but check into every project on the time clock. That's really important. And unless you do that, you really don't know if you're making good margins.
Yeah, you could check into a SKU. So we talk about our food manufacturers, and I'm always really proud to say that we work for McClure's Pickles, so you can find their pickles in Target, Walmart, Kroger, all the big box retailers. And when you look at SKUs, right, which they're really good at, then you can see, okay, how do I do per SKU? And so it doesn't matter which food manufacturer you are or manufacturer of a product. It may take you 10 hours to build one phone, right? You use that as an example, versus another phone that you'll take 5 hours. And what you realize is the production time varies so drastically, but you were selling the phone for the same amount of money. And so that's when you go, oh my goodness, we need to increase the price of this because it takes us double time. Yes, it takes all the same materials, but the time to put it together takes longer. And so that's when, how do we measure our labor per SKU or per product? And it becomes a drastic change in the organization as far as moving us along to bigger margins.
So important. And I talk about this concept of deviation and asymmetry. So when you think about a business, and if I'm a doctor's office, there are busy times and there are slow times. Does my staffing change based upon that? Well, it should, or I should remove some of the asymmetry from that and figure out how I schedule people more effectively. My wife has this one doctor and she knows I won't even go anymore. We've never been there where it's been less than a 2-hour wait. He's 2 hours behind. One point, he was 6 hours behind taking appointments. And they actually told us when we got there, might as well leave, go do shopping, have dinner, come back later today. He's just that far behind. And I'm like, how can you be like, he's losing money. He's losing patience, patience because of that. And so think about your business and think about, how do you do the same thing as often as possible? How do you do repetitive things, and how do you maintain that flow through your business? You don't want, you can look at a tire and say, well, it's only flat on the bottom. Well, that's what happens when you have that part of your business that's not being fully maximized. And the only way you can tell is by doing individual P&Ls on every single thing that you sell, every SKU.
Right.
So those are the ways that you can improve cash flow. And I know we've gone a little bit over our time, but we have a little bit of a gap in the middle there that we have to edit out for the sake of the internet. But, we talked about payables, receivables. We talked about terms. We've talked about better margins. We've talked about having a bank, right? Either you being your bank or having a bank. We've talked about paying it different, trying to get a cash discount for paying. Maybe you offer people discounts for paying faster. All of those ways that we can improve. And then if you got the money, hire a hedge fund manager and come in and hedge all your materials and do all that kind of stuff. You probably aren't going to do that one, but I think there's some really great stuff there. Yeah. And these are all things that we can help at Profit Matters too. If you don't know how to do these things, this is what we do. We help customers and figure out the best way to manage their business and to manage the bottom line of it. And in the end, it's because profit matters. And we know that. It's why you named it what you did, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's awesome.